Welcome back to Guns 101, brought to you by the Self-Defense Radio Network. This is our welcome message to brand new gun owners. I'm Rob Morse from Self-Defense Gun Stories. My partners in crime here are Amanda Suffolk from Eye on the Target Radio, and doing the heavy lifting behind the curtain, that's Paul Lathrop from the Polite Society podcast. Our guest is Derek LeBlanc, I've missed that twice, from the Kid Safe Foundation. He's going to talk about handgun basics for revolvers. Derek, the shelves were stripped. People said, I need a gun for self-defense. What should I get? Well, little lady, that revolver is what we recommend. People got all kinds of things. Help them understand what they're looking at in the box, would you please?
Okay, so I'm going to start off today with what's called the welcome new gun owners. So this is a single double action revolver. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of show you, whenever I'm handling a fire, I'm always going to check to make sure it's clear. There's no ammunition in this room. I'm going to treat this as a sterile environment. And so this is what's called a single or a double action revolver. Okay, this is a Ruger SP 101. And so the way I'm going to kind of hold this is I'm going to kind of stick my fingers in kind of like that, pointing the muzzle away from me and anyone else. And so in this position, I can render this gun about as safe as I possibly can, because this gun cannot fire in this position because this cylinder right here cannot close, okay? The cylinder is what contains all the ammunition. This is how I would load and unload this firearm. So I could put the bullets in here like this. I can also unload it like this, all while rendering this gun as safe as I possibly can because the cylinder is still open, okay? So when I'm talking about single or double action revolver, so a double action, when I pull the trigger, this hammer spur right here does two things. It goes back and then falls, the gun goes bang, just like this, okay? Just like that, okay? What makes this really, really dangerous for kids or people that really don't know how this type of firearm works is there's no actual safety on this gun, okay? The only safety I have is this, which is I call it my trigger finger, my booger picker, right? And this right here, my brain, okay? So it's really, really important that I exercise, good judgment at all times, okay? And so when I'm talking about single action, that means this hammer is already back just like this. This trigger, when I pull the trigger, the hammer does one thing. It falls, the gun goes bang. See like that? Look at the difference between double action mode, where that trigger reset is, and single action, okay? So I barely have to touch that trigger for that gun to go off, okay? So obviously, really, really important that you treat this. I hear horror stories all the time. One time there was a kid that found one of these in a couch cushion at a sleepover, okay? So really, really important that our kids know what not to do if they come across one of these, okay? Sometimes these guns are used in the commission of a crime. They're kind of thrown out the window. Kids can find them going to and from school. So it's really, really important that our kids know what not to do. So obviously we're going to stop, don't touch, run away, tell a grown-up, okay? Never pick this type of firearm up, okay? So this right here, there's no actual recoil spring inside this gun. So actually a lot of that energy from the pistol going off is going to be transferred into the body. So, these are common, but not necessarily the most practical for new shooters. So anything else, guys?
Okay, so you're talking about a revolver for folks that may have picked up. And so if they're looking for a gun for home firearm safety, and they walk into a store, maybe they haven't bought a gun yet. They're watching our videos thinking about buying a gun. What would you recommend? Should they buy a single action? Should they buy a double action? You were saying something about a single that may be a double. It's very confusing. So
okay.
What do you recommend? And so talk it through.
Okay, so with this, this is what's called a single or a double. So I can do both with this gun. That's why this by far is probably the most popular, most common type of gun that would be used in a defensive type situation when it comes to a revolver. That way I can actually, if I need to, if I don't have a lot of time in a close proximity to somebody, I can just draw the firearm, the gun will go bang, right? So, but if I need a good, well-placed shot, a longer range shot, I can just pull that hammer back, have a short, crisp trigger pull, the gun will go bang. Okay, so I never want to discourage anyone from any type of firearm. So firearm ownership comes, to personal preference, right? The guns that I like, the guns that work for me might not work for you. And so it's important that, Google is a good help. Make sure there's good videos out there on YouTube. Make sure you get a good relevant instructor that has good information out there, that maybe lots of likes or follows, that way you make sure your information's good.
Okay.
These are, they're very, very popular, very common. So.
Okay, so they're very popular, very common. So the one thing that as advice that I've got is that if you're a brand new gun owner and you're looking for a gun that you're going to bring into the house to use as self-defense, strongly consider a double action gun. And what they mean by double action is that no matter which position the hammer is in, you don't have to cock the hammer like you would in a Western movie, but which position the hammer is in, you pull the trigger and bullets come out when you need them to. And it goes bang.
Yep.
But with a single action, you can pull the trigger all you want, and if the hammer is not back, it will not go off. The trigger will not do what you want it to do. So
that's single action, just like that.
Right. So knowing that as you're shopping for a gun is really kind of critical, because you can get the wrong kind of gun that in an emergency situation puts more and more action and more pressure on the homeowner to use it as a self-defense gun, which is where most of our audience is bringing them in, because they're fearful that right now the situation is there's a lockdown, the police are not coming unless for a lot of the circumstances, they're saying if it's this or this or this or this, the police aren't coming. So they're buying guns for those reasons. So we want to kind of give them a little bit of guidance and advice.
So another really important thing right here, I'll try to show you, is what's called the forcing cone. You see the forcing cone? It's right there. The forcing cone is where the cylinder would meet the barrel, okay? So it's really, really important. If I'm new to this type of firearm, is I'm making sure that I don't have any type of my fingers or my hand in this area, okay? So when this gun fires, there's a little gap here that's minimal, but there will be gases that will escape, okay? You can get seriously injured or burned in this environment. And so it's important, if I'm going to hold this properly, finger off the trigger, right? My hands are going to be back just kind of like this. I'm going to kind of cup this finger off the trigger, okay? So never have I can't hold this like I would a semi-automatic, because I could be injured.
So a good grip and being clear of that. So let me explain that in a manner for those who a forcing cone has no meaning at all to them. We might as well talk about landing on the moon. What happens is the hammer comes down, the bullet takes off. So the explosion happens, the bullet's moving. It's going in air, in space between the cylinder that rotates and the barrel itself. So it kind of has a spot where it expands out and freeforms, and then it gets shoved into the barrel and continues out. So when it goes from the cylinder to the barrel, if there's any little bit of misalignment, it shaves off little parts and shoots them out sideways where you are. And that's why you don't want to be in that zone. Does that make sense?
I think so. That was a good analogy.
I want you to talk about one last thing before we wrap up. They gave me a bunch of things so that I could store my revolver safely. What does that look like?
Okay.
How do they do that?
So a cable lock. You can use a cable lock in lieu of a good gun vault, okay? So one thing about the cable locks, okay, they can be easily defeated, and they don't prevent theft, okay? So that's why I'm not necessarily a big fan of the cable locks. But they're required under federal law to come with every firearm now. And so they are an option. So the cable lock would go inside the cylinder and prevent the cylinder from being able to close in a fully closed position. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't have one up here. I would show you guys how they work. I prefer the gun vaults. There's a couple different manufacturers out there. You can find them. Amazon's a good place to check.
Yeah, and you can get a gun vault for price points anywhere from $10 to a couple $100, depending on how fast
Exactly.
you want to get in them and what you're looking for. Well, Derek, thanks for talking about that. I mean, because I think these are critical pieces of information that new gun owners need to know. And so, folks, if you want to get to know who Derek is, what he does, it's kidssafefoundation.org. Look him up because you're going to be pretty impressed with what he does and what his life's mission has become. If you want to see some of the more stuff from some of the other instructors that are in this group and in this group of videos, go to sdrn.us and you can find Rob Morris hanging out with Self-Defense Gun Stories, and he does a show on a weekly basis. We'll be back.